Celebrities and influencers have come out of the woodwork to support Israel. But they aren't bad people, they're just germaphobes who endorse all kinds of cleansing, especially ethnic. The celebrities include Chuck Schumer's second cousin, IDF Wonder Woman, that woman does make you wonder, and Jerry Seinfeld. What's the deal with that guy? I don't know about you, but I like to take my moral cues from a guy who dated a 17-year-old when he was 38. Not that there's anything wrong with that, except laws. Anyway, many of the other influencers supporting Israel are actually being paid to do so. We have no idea how many influencers actually took the $5,000 deal, but we do know some of the ones who didn't.
I will not sell on Palestinians for any amount of money. You cannot buy my support of a genocide. This is disgusting.
Then there's the $250 that was offered to each college student who would show up to the recent pro-apartheid, I don't really understand things, but I can hold up this poster, rally in Washington, D.C. And when I was a college kid, $250 sounded like more money than God has.
We don't need to worry about Israel providing support for Palestinians because they're so good at that. In fact, we even have a picture of this. This is a picture of their aid, and it was tweeted out by the country of Israel. Tweeted this image out. It says it's a tweet by the government of Israel, literally Israel at Israel on Twitter. 11,000 trucks, 140,000 tons of food, 1,000 water trucks, 17,000 tons of medical supplies, 23,000 tons of tents and shelter equipment. Israel will continue to facilitate the transfer of life-saving humanitarian aid to Gaza. Our war is with Hamas, not with the people of Gaza, right? And then they write hashtag Free Gaza from Hamas. And it says, and approximately 23 tons of tents and shelter equipment. And so that image below is apparently the shelter equipment. But there's only one problem. So here's what that actual image is, okay?
Oh, an iStock image.
It's an iStock image, right? And what it actually presents is tents in Moldova. For Ukrainian refugees.
Land arranged on the territory of Moldova.
Yes.
Some spokespeople for the Israeli military recently posted this and said it was a schedule found in Rantisi Children's Hospital in Gaza showing which Hamas terrorists were guarding hostages. And this, of course, is an attempt to justify the Israeli bombings of Gazan hospitals, which have outraged the world. However, unfortunately for these Israeli propagandists, some people know how to read Arabic. And they pointed out that this is literally just a calendar with the days of the week written on it. It doesn't say anything about Hamas, hostages, or holding those hostages in a children's hospital. Unless the names of the Hamas members are Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. But anyways, this just shows how desperate the Israeli propaganda machine is to justify their bombings of civilians and hospitals. Make sure to take everything you hear from the media and the Israeli government with more than a grain of salt. You need to take it with like a heaping garbage truck filled with salt.
Look above it. It's a baby bottle. It's a baby bottle in a basement. Above, a World Health Organization sign. This is a suspicion for an area where hostages were being held. We see diapers, and we see, I don't know, maybe something. You see diapers, toilets, shower, a small kitchen will provide the terrorists their needs. Also conduct a hideout where terrorists take hostages and hide out. You're now entering into the room where we suspect the hostages were being held. People are putting curtains, nothing above, just wall. No reason to put here a curtain. And now we'll show you more evidence.
Which at first glance already provides a lot of incriminating evidence. This is Israeli private Megidish, who was taken hostage by Hamas. She is home with her family because we were able to rescue her.
You had a bunch of Zionists on Twitter sharing this video that they purported was Hamas terrorists with Israeli civilians. And they had subtitles for when they talked. And the subtitles basically were, rapey language, let's say, right? Well, come to find out, of course, the subtitles were made up. So even Reuters came out here. Reuters has now done 2 separate fact checks on videos Zionists hysterically lie about showing Hamas referring to Israelis as sex slaves or threatening rape, concluding it's false. But Zionist propagandists are still repeating the same propaganda lie. Fact check. Video of captured woman mistranslate captor as threatening rape. The verdict is misleading. The subtitles are mistranslations of the Arabic audio. No individual in the video says the woman is to be raped. Verdict false. The Arabic audio in the video of Morin Stella Yaneh crouching in a ditch has been mistranslated. No individual says she will be taken as a sex slave.
The headline here is CNN is running Gaza coverage past their Jerusalem team operating under the shadow of the IDF censor. Citing the IDF spokesperson and relaying info about the IDF's operations in the Gaza Strip, at least one story that has her byline alone is little more than a direct statement released from the IDF. So this is who they brought in for their coverage, which they are also choosing to run by the IDF censor. She apparently served in the IDF's spokesperson unit, a division of the Israeli military charged with carrying out positive PR, both domestically and abroad. Seems like she still works for that unit, actually. And Israel coverage is subject to a special review process that is unique to just exclusively to Israel coverage. A CNN staff member described how the policy works in practice. Quote, war crime and genocide are taboo words. Israeli bombings in Gaza will be reported as, quote, blasts attributed to nobody until the Israeli military weighs in to either accept or deny responsibility. Quotes and info provided by Israeli army and government officials tend to be approved quickly, while those from Palestinians tend to be heavily scrutinized and slowly processed. Sagar, can you imagine if a news outlet was running all of their stories by Hamas before publishing it, how people would feel about that? And yet CNN thinks that this is all fine and well and good and counts as journalism. Plainly obvious. Like the language that they talk about here, oh, it's going to be blast, but we're not going to attribute to Israel, is manifestly clear. Put this up on the screen. This is a horrifying story. More than 10 children a day are losing one or both legs in Gaza, according to Save the Children. So their headline does not attribute the fact that these kids are losing their limbs to Israel, which is the reason that they're losing these limbs. And then when you read the story, here's what they say. More than 10 children on average have lost one or both of their legs every day in Gaza since October 7th. Again, like the limbs just fell off. No, they lost them because they were bombed by Israel. While many of the amputations are conducted without anesthetic. Again, why? Because Israel is blocking medical supplies from coming in. The charity Save the Children said in a statement Sunday referencing statistics released by the UN. And then they quote someone as saying, doctors and nurses are completely overwhelmed when children are brought in with blast wounds. Blast wounds. So again, the language is specifically cited in the Intercept report. Nowhere in here, in this first part of the report, do they explain why these kids are losing their limbs, 10 kids a day losing one or both legs and having to be operated on with no anesthetic, no responsibility attributed there. Now, if it was in the other direction, if it was talking about the October 7th attacks and the atrocities that Hamas were committed, no problem attributing responsibility, no problem using visceral language about those horrors. But here, when it's Israel, totally different.
When Washington Post's Liza Dwoskin was at Columbia, she denied Nakba, claiming there was no Palestinian nation, and Palestine, with hundreds of villages and cities, was home to just a few, quote, desert Bedouins. That's who's assigned to write about Intifada. And here we see in the Columbia Spectator, it is one thing to come out against abuses, this was her academic writing at Columbia, and another to indict the state of Israel for an illegitimate existence. As the gift of the British, who only got the territory as a result of a colonial war, one can see Israel as existing on stolen land. But stolen from whom? Before the British swept in, there was no Palestinian nation. The territory was taken from the ailing Ottoman Empire and consisted of desert Bedouins without a sense of national identity as we know it today.
Zev Jabotinsky is sort of the ideological godfather of Netanyahu. He wrote a whole paper called The Iron Wall, which basically argued that Jewish colonists who had come to the land of Palestine wouldn't be able to form a nation without an iron wall of bayonets, which is basically acknowledging that there's a real people there and a real nation that is going to resist them if they try to dominate them. So this is like 2023 right now. I don't know when Liza Dwoskin wrote that, but I assume it's in the modern or postmodern era when we understand that colonialism is wrong, and she's still trying to justify it in a college paper. I mean, this is just weird and anachronistic. And the Washington Post hires her as their social media reporter. I mean, this is the important background on her. I wasn't really like raised Zionist. I was raised, I went to Hebrew school and was raised around a lot of Jewish people, but my immediate family didn't really tell me you have to love Israel. I think they're all pretty uncomfortable. There was always like a level of discomfort about it because, I mean, why wouldn't you be if you're a decent person? Yeah, Israel dropped GBU 2,000-pound bunker buster bombs on a densely populated refugee camp, killed 70 people in one strike. There's no military value at all. They just did it for fun. And then they went and said, yeah, we did it, but we used the wrong weapon. We wanted to use a smaller bomb. So the Washington Post headline was, they literally said that.
You know what minimizes what was done to those innocent Israelis? Killing 10 times the number of people. That tends to minimize the initial
killing. And I gotta say, the more I looked into this, why are you having a music festival next to a concentration camp? Why is really? Like, you can enjoy yourself knowing that these people are locked in on the other side of the wall?
Yeah. I mean, you can literally see electrified fencing with machine gun turrets on top.
That's probably why you felt comfortable. It looked pretty secure.
This seems safe. It's like the ultimate gated community.
I just wanted to mention that. Why are we using the word Palestinian? There's no such thing as a Palestinian person.
Will you now take the opportunity to condemn what Hamas did on October the 7th? Would you condemn Hamas for what they did? Was what happened on October the 7th? Do you condemn what Hamas did that day?
Condemn Hamas murdering Israelis on October 7th. Do you condemn 9/11?
Do you condemn what Hamas did?
Did you condemn what Hamas did?
Do you unreservedly condemn? Do you unreservedly condemn? Will you now take the opportunity to condemn? Are you prepared to condemn it? Do you unreservedly condemn that?
Because I see the question coming. Do you condemn Hamas for that?
Are you done yet? It's actually a critical question.
Are you done yet?
It's a critical question.
Are you done yet?
No, it's the question.
Are you done yet?
Let's have a look at media bias.
The very definition of Islam, by the very definition of being a Muslim voter, you're going to be anti-Jewish.
I'm struck by two things. One, the horrifying immediate response, not just in America, but when you saw mobs in Sydney, Australia, chanting "Gas the Jews," when you saw...
Except there is no evidence that was actually chanted outside of the Opera House. The study analyzed more than 176,000 TV clips and more than 25,000 news articles and revealed a bias focused on the Israel-Hamas war. framing.
This conflict is extremely complicated and it's difficult to explain to people exactly what is happening.
TV broadcast channels heavily favored
Israel has a right to defend themselves
over Palestinian rights with a ratio of 5-1.
We keep hearing these demands for a ceasefire. On the surface, it sounds peaceful, but really, don't these calls for a ceasefire just mean that Israel should back off and let the terrorists thrive?
And then there were just all sorts of factually incorrect statements, which weren't just wrong, but framed the issue without context. For example, the title of this video is that Israel takes control over border, yet the border has always been under Israeli control. And it's well known that there are Israeli military checkpoints for Palestinians in the occupied Palestinian territories. Language. Terms used to describe the deaths of Palestinians are sometimes qualified with phrases such as, what they say is a massacre. Israelis are about 11 times more likely to be referred to as victims of attacks compared to Palestinians.
Leaked New York Times Gaza memo tells journalists to avoid words genocide, ethnic cleansing, and occupied territory. They're telling their own journalists and reporters, you're not allowed to use these words. Okay, that's called censorship. So Ryan Grimm and Jeremy Scahill did the reporting for The Intercept here. The New York Times instructed journalists covering Israel's war on the Gaza Strip to restrict the use of terms genocide and ethnic cleansing and avoid using the phrase occupied territory when describing Palestinian land, according to a copy of an internal memo obtained by The Intercept. Occupied territory. It is internationally acknowledged as occupied territory. The memo also instructs reporters not to use the word Palestine except in very rare cases and to steer clear of the term refugee camps to describe areas of Gaza historically settled by displaced Palestinians expelled from other parts of Palestine during previous Israeli-Arab wars. While the document is presented as an outline for maintaining objective journalistic principles, oh my god, in reporting on the Gaza war, several Times staffers told The Intercept that some of its contents show evidence of the paper's deference to Israeli narratives. You don't say, quote, I think it's the kind of thing that looks professional and logical if you have no knowledge of the historical context of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, said a Times newsroom source, who requested anonymity for fear of reprisal of the Gaza memo. Quote, but if you do know, it will be clear how apologetic it is to Israel. When it's violence against Israelis, it's terrorism, massacre, slaughter. They use words like horrific. When it's violence against Palestinians, it's passive language. There was a blast. A blast occurred. Who did the blast? I guess the blast better stop that.
And first and foremost, our condolences go out to the families and loved ones of those who apparently lost their lives.
You know something phrased differently? When Israelis are killed, it's they were massacred. When Palestinians, these are Palestinians who work for the UN, who work at the UNRWA facility, when Palestinians are killed, it's our condolences go out to those who may have apparently could have possibly lost their lives. They can't find their lives. Where did their lives go? We don't know. That's how they announced that Israel has bombed a UN facility and killed those inside.
I don't know the details of what happened. I do know.
By the way, another thing, he also never knows the details of what happened when it's Israel murdering other people. When it's the reverse, oh man, do they have that information. In fact, Joe Biden, the day after, 2 days after October 7th, said he saw video of beheaded babies that never existed. So that's how much they know about when Israel's attacked. They know everything. They know, oh my God, Gazans came in here and they beheaded all those babies. And I saw a video of it. Absolutely. None of that happened. But the baby thing. But Biden apparently saw a video of it. The White House later backtracked on that. But you notice how they pretend to have information when Israelis are killed. But when 30,000 Palestinians are killed, I just can't find the documents. I don't know. I don't know what happened. I wish someone would tell me. Do you know? Maybe you guys can tell me.
Based on what we've heard from the Israeli government, that the idea.
So he just admitted that this is the information we're getting from the Israeli government, which, they never lie.
On what we've heard from the Israeli government, that the IDF is investigating, the Israeli Defense Forces are investigating.
The IDF is investigating themselves. Did you catch that? IDF investigating themselves. What do you think they're going to find?
I think it does, as a general matter, underscore something I talked about a few minutes ago, and that's the imperative of having much better and much more consistent deconfliction.
Talk about euphemizing a genocide where you're massacring children. You know what we need? If you're standing in the middle of a genocide, watching it happen, in the horror of it, do you go, you know what we need is some deconfliction. That's what we need. If I could just get a little deconfliction around here, I think it would all be fine, right? Just some deconfliction. God, the euphemisms they come up with.
You'll notice in Western media, particularly CNN, they have a policy. We're not going to blame Israel for anything unless Israel says, hey, yeah, we did that. So that leads to the most tortured headlines you've ever seen in your life. 5-year-old Palestinian girl found dead after being trapped in car with dead relatives.
A U.S. soldier set himself on fire in protest outside of Israel's embassy in Washington, D.C. He shouted, "Free Palestine," and he said that he would not be complicit in U.S.-sponsored genocide in Gaza. This was a deeply symbolic protest that recalls the people who set themselves on fire in protest of the U.S. war on Vietnam. However, if you only read the headlines of major newspapers in the U.S., you would have no idea why this U.S. soldier committed suicide. Major media outlets like the New York Times published very vague headlines titled, "Man dies after setting himself on fire outside Israeli embassy in Washington," police say. The Washington Post wrote, "Airman dies after setting himself on fire outside Israeli embassy in D.C." CNN had basically the same headline, "U.S. airman dies after setting himself on fire outside Israeli embassy in Washington." And Israeli media outlets were the same. They did not explain what happened. The Jerusalem Post wrote, "U.S. Air Force soldier sets himself on fire outside Israeli embassy in D.C." No explanation of why. However, compare it to how the Western media covers Russia, and you can see that it's completely different, showing blatant double standards. In 2020, a Russian journalist set herself on fire. She was being investigated and charged by the Russian government, and in protest, she committed suicide. And the New York Times headline was, "Russian journalist sets herself on fire and dies, blaming government." Let's look at these two headlines back to back, and we can see very clearly how the media pushes particular perspectives that advance the interests of Western foreign policy, in particular U.S. foreign policy. The headline, the Russian journalist, notes that she blamed the government and it was a protest. The headline on the U.S. soldier who committed suicide in protest of genocide in Gaza makes no mention of the fact that it was a protest, makes no mention of his political motivations. Let's look at another example, this time from the BBC, British state media. The first headline is titled, "Irina Slavina, Final Protest of Russian Journalist Who Set Herself on Fire," noting that it was a protest. And yet here's their other headline. Aaron Bushnell, U.S. airman dies after setting himself on fire outside Israeli embassy in Washington. Why? Was it a protest? Was it politically motivated? He died? What happened? Now, people might say, well, you're only looking at the headlines, which is misleading. But as the Washington Post acknowledged, in the United States, the vast majority of people only read the headlines. The Washington Post cited a 2014 study from the American Press Institute, which found that only 4 out of 10 Americans report that they delve deeper into a news subject beyond the headlines. That is to say, 60% roughly of people in the United States do not read past the headlines. So when there are misleading headlines like this, they don't know what's happening. So let's take a look at this New York Times report, and we can see a case study in propaganda. In the 5th paragraph, the New York Times quotes this soldier who committed suicide, and he said in a video that he live streamed on Twitch, quote, "I will no longer be complicit in genocide. I'm about to engage in an extreme act of protest, but compared to what people have been experiencing in Palestine at the hands of their colonizers, it's not extreme at all." And finally, in the 6th paragraph, they mention that he yelled "Free Palestine." They don't mention that in the first 4 paragraphs of this article. So only a small percentage of people who read this article will actually figure out what's happening. This is propaganda. And as if that weren't enough, in this article, when they quote him saying, "I will no longer be complicit in genocide," the journalist at the New York Times very euphemistically says that he was echoing language that opponents of Israel's military offensive in Gaza have used.
Here's another one for you. A French feminist and peace advocate falsely claimed on French TV that 67 different Hamas members, their sperm was found inside an Israeli released hostage. The video got 2.3 million views. Now she quietly admits it was a lie, but CNews still hasn't taken that video down or apologized.
You've made that point 5 times already.
I don't know what you have time
Oh my
for.
God, for the love of God, let me finish a sentence, man. Maybe not use the women talking. I don't know, but I'd like to finish a sentence.
Wow.
Anyway, what would have been an acceptable reaction to you? You've got 10 seconds left.
To end occupation and allow peace to prevail for both people.
That's very brilliant. Yeah. Sorry to have been a woman speaking to you, but there you are. Doctor, do you think that actually a ceasefire will in any way benefit the ordinary people of Gaza, ordinary civilians, including children?
What an unbelievably stupid question. Do you believe a ceasefire would benefit the ordinary people of Gaza? You ask that question with a straight face after 20,000 plus civilians, most of whom women and children, have been killed. Let's hear his answer.
Well, they're being massacred on a daily basis, Julia, at the moment. So, of course, a ceasefire will be beneficial to the people living in Gaza, which is, let's remember, is a concentration camp.
It's not a concentration camp.
Well, I'm sorry,
How
Julia,
dare you use that phrase? How dare you?
Well, I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry. Are Palestinians working gas chambers in Gaza?
Julia, what is the definition of a concentration camp?
Seem like a normal person with normal values.
They have a fence around them.
She should be sent to Gaza.
They are regularly bombarded by the Israeli regime. What an absolute outrage. And how you can defend a regime which is behaving worse than Nazis, actually, in some
Worse than
respects.
Nazis. There we go.
Yes,
Worse than
absolutely.
Nazis.
Because what we
By
are
the numbers.
seeing, thousands of children have been murdered by this Israeli
Why
regime.
don't we just save time? Why don't you just come on the show and just shout, "I hate Jewish people"?
Children are being killed at a faster rate in Gaza than in the concentration camps.
Yes, by the numbers, they are worse than Nazis. By the numbers.
Yes, not in terms of gross body count yet, but in terms of their pace. Children being killed at a faster pace in Gaza than in the concentration camps.
And save everyone time.
What do you say about the Jewish people then that have joined the rallies in some marches in support of a ceasefire, in support of the Palestinian people? What do you say about them, Julia? Because there are thousands of Jews who are utterly opposed.
There are thousands.
Okay, so she just called him an anti-Semite, and he said, well, then what do you have to say about the thousands of Jews who are protesting for a ceasefire? Notice what she did. She looked down at the table. She had nothing to say about that. She had to think of the next cheat point to make, and here it comes.
There are tens of thousands of Jews in this country who are terrified about what is happening because of people like you who are basically saying you support terrorist organizations that don't think that Israel or the Jewish people have a right to exist.
Okay, first of all, Jews, to the extent that we are terrified, it's actually because of people like you, Julia, and because of people like Benjamin Netanyahu, who are killing 1,000 children a week. And when you say that to criticize Israel is to criticize Jews, it is you who endanger us, not Chris Williamson.
Because you are telling people, sane, rational people, which in spite of what you might have heard, I believe most people are, who can understand a horrific crime against humanity when they see one on a daily basis. And you telling people that that is synonymous with the Jewish identity and Jewish people does nothing but create anti-Semitism.
Exactly. And here comes really, I think, the coup de grace.
This country who are terrified about what is happening because of people like you who are basically saying you support terrorist organizations that don't think that Israel or the Jewish people have a right to exist.
The terrorist organization is the Israeli regime. They are the terrorists.
They're a democratically elected government. They're a democratically elected government.
You know who else were democratically elected? The Nazi Party.
They were.
The Nazi Party.
It's an absolutely apartheid regime. There's no doubt about that.
It's not an apartheid regime. I mean,
based on what? Okay, let me.
There is nothing you can.
Hold on a minute.
And this is very important because they often invoke this talking point that it can't be an apartheid regime because they have Arabs who are citizens. Okay, those are people who managed to hold on through the Nakba and not get driven out. Those are those people and their descendants. Now, why do they allow them? For this reason, because they deploy them anytime they need to defend themselves against accusations that they're an apartheid regime. If you are Palestinian, you cannot get Israeli citizenship even by marriage. So this is this little population that they use to claim that they're not an apartheid regime. But if you are not among these people who managed to hold on in that region through the Nakba, and you are not Jewish, you are not getting citizenship in Israel.
Wall Street Journal. Welcome to Dearborn, America's jihad capital. Imams and politicians in the Michigan city side with Hamas against Israel and Iran against the U.S. Here's a line from it. They say, open support for Hamas is spreading. Since October 7th, similar protests have occurred in major American cities featuring pro-jihadist imagery, chants, and slogans. Rallies are now also expressing support for the Iran-backed Houthis who are lobbing missiles at Israel and trying to sink commercial vessels in the Red Sea. What's happening in Dearborn, they say, isn't simply a political problem for Democrats. It's potentially a national security issue affecting all Americans. Counterterrorism agencies at all levels should pay close attention. So, Sagar, as if it's not enough to, level this racist smear against an entire city, they also want to call in the, FBI and CIA to make sure to investigate and surveil the residents of the city as well.
What I'm going to say is it should just be obvious to everyone, which is that we have a vast number of people in the Muslim community worldwide, not just in the occupied territories or in Gaza, who are powerfully deranged by religious symbols and their religious identity, which is to say, this is the most important thing to them, but more important even than the deaths of their own children. Right? We're talking about a culture, again, I'm not talking about just Palestinians, I'm talking about the Muslim community worldwide in dozens of countries that has produced a seemingly unending supply of suicide bombers over the last 50 years, right? We're talking about societies where phenomena that should be impossible are simply to be expected. I mean, literally like rigging children to explode.
There's a large amount of literature since 9/11 on suicide bombers. Does he cite anything? How many out of those 1 He said a steady stream for 50 years. I'd be curious. How many Muslim children are rigged to explode? How many Muslim children? I would like to know. I think that's an interesting number. Since we're talking about people who are powerfully deranged, the 1 month into the Israeli genocide in Gaza, there was a poll done, Time magazine, and a report that's 57% of Israelis think that Israel is not using enough force in Gaza, not using enough force. Now, there's no fog of war. Israelis have a relatively free media, and they all have access to the internet, so they see all the same pictures as you see and I see. They see all of those kids, and they think not enough force is being used. Do you know what percentage think too much force is being used? You know what percentage? 2%. I would say that's prima facie evidence of being powerfully deranged. People don't want to hear it, but I'll say it. Israel is a citizen army, but that's a two-edged sword. You know why?
Because everyone's militarized?
Well, no, it's a two-edged sword because that means they're representative of Israelis in general. So when they carry out a genocide,
right,
representative of Israeli society.
Right.
Everyone in Israel is either a war criminal or a vicarious war criminal. Everybody participating in that is, they brought up 350,000 reservists. Everybody participating is a participant in the genocide. I don't think there's any comparative redeeming virtue in murdering others from high-tech weapons and murdering them with your body. How about targeting hospitals? How about targeting ambulances? How about targeting desalinization plants? Is that better? I have to say, I think it's more cowardly. At least the suicide bomber is willing to sacrifice it's not very rarely women, I think there has been women, is willing to sacrifice his life. If we're going to make comparisons, I think a suicide bomber actually has at least some raw physical courage, willing to sacrifice. Well, he'll of course say, because they're crazy with their religion, give me liberty or give me death. Was that religion? Was that religious fanaticism? There's a whole wonderful tradition of people willing to give their lives. Remember Martin Luther King, the last speech he gave? Longevity has its value. I've been to the mountaintop. I'm not afraid anymore. So was he a religious fanatic because he was willing to die? So you can say, no, that's not the same because with Hamas and the other fanatics, they blow up innocents. Really? Fine, I agree with that. And what do you think is going on in Gaza? Hospitals, where Human Rights Watch concluded that there was no military justification for the targeting of hospitals. What are you targeting in hospitals? You're talking about targeting the lame, the sick, the nearly dead, and the newborn. That's what you're targeting in hospitals. That's okay?
CNN senior political commentator Scott Jennings went on an absolutely insane, fact-free tirade against Representative Ilhan Omar.
There is a public relations agent for Hamas sitting in the United States Congress. Ceasefire, she said, don't happen magically. Well, there was a ceasefire in place on October the 6th. And who broke it on October the 7th?
But let me first just very easily dismantle this garbage that he just said at the end there, that there was a ceasefire on October 6th. Was there? Because the Israeli government was not aware of that. Let's go through, I'm not going to go through it all because there's too many examples. But on the 5th, Israeli forces killed 3 Palestinians in the West Bank. And we can keep going. On the 22nd of September, they killed an 18-year-old Palestinian. On the 19th, Palestinians in Gaza protested Israel's inhumane treatment of Palestinian prisoners in attacks on Al-Aqsa Mosque. In response, Israel murdered somebody else. The 19th, again, forces killed 5 Palestinians and wounded 30. We can just go on and on and on and on and on. This is an occupation. The Israeli government controls the West Bank and Gaza. Death toll in Israeli-Palestinian conflict over the last 15 years. So Palestinian fatalities are in orange, Israeli fatalities are in purple. And I don't even have to say anything else. And this is just 2008. Of course, you can go further back. It's the exact same thing. Ilhan Omar, here are her own words on October 7th, saying, I condemn the horrific acts we are seeing unfold today in Israel against children, women, and the elderly, and the unarmed people who are being slaughtered and taken hostage by Hamas. Such senseless violence will only repeat the back and forth cycle we've seen, which we cannot allow to continue. We need to call for a de-escalation and ceasefire. I will keep advocating for peace and justice throughout the Middle East. Voicemails shared with NBC News include profanity-laced death threats, calling Omar a terrorist Muslim. Another claimed a vigilante group spying on the congresswoman and your children had obtained all your addresses and handed them out to a word I can't say on YouTube. I'm from a militant group, quote unquote, the male caller of a third voicemail claimed, quote, I can't wait till our group sees you one day and I can rip your effing rag off your head. I hope the Israelis kill every effing one of you. Mark Lamont Hill, let go from CNN in 2018 over his so-called controversial remarks on Israel, which was simply calling for Palestinians to be able to live freely without having to live under an occupation. In his remarks at that meeting, Hill said, quote, we must advocate and promote non-violence, added that we cannot endorse a narrow politics of respectability that shames Palestinians for resisting, for refusing to do nothing in the face of state violence and ethnic cleansing. Hill also called for a free Palestine from the river to the sea. He went on to even clarify at the time. Yesterday, I gave a speech to the UN in which I critiqued Israel's policies and practice towards Palestinians. It's baffling how people are not responding to the critique, but instead responding to things I didn't actually say. My reference to river to the sea was not a call to destroy anything or anyone. It was a call for justice, both in Israel and in the West Bank and Gaza. The speech very clearly and specifically said those things. No amount of debate will change what I actually said or what I meant. He was fired from CNN because of the negative connotation that phrase has, which interestingly was used by the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, to not mean human rights, but instead he rejected the premise of a Palestinian state and promised that Israel will take over the entire region it currently occupies from the river to the sea. Netanyahu said this phrase to mean domination.
I want to show you a clip now from the mainstream media. Just watch and observe.
The Israeli military say that they have killed and detained hundreds of Hamas militants within the Al-Shifa complex. Do you know if Hamas were there and were fighting with the Israelis?
I am just shocked that we're still having this conversation. They executed tens of people point blank, including one of our colleagues, Dr. Ahmed Khalalati, who's a very experienced plastic surgeon, him and his mother, who's also a physician. They executed people point blank. And including many of our colleagues who've been detained now. We haven't heard back from them. Previous students of mine detained, young doctors detained. We don't know if they're dead or alive. They have been gone for over 100 days. So to say that this is a strategic targeting of Hamas is an insult to our intellect and our humanity. This is a destruction of people who heal. This is a direct targeting of healthcare workers. I just want to paint a very brief picture of what healthcare workers are telling me there. They're saying that when they leave the hospital, civilians give them civilian clothing because wearing scrubs is sticking a target sticker on their back. That is how systematically healthcare has.
Do you understand what she just said? I'll let her finish the 20 seconds, but do you understand what she just said? She said that when her students leave the hospital, they're dressed as doctors, right? Civilians give them clothes, different clothes, so they can hide that they are doctors, because when the Israelis see a doctor, they kill the doctors. It's bad to be dressed as a doctor because you are a target to the Israelis.
Being targeted. And frankly, in the last 24 hours, what we've seen from Al-Shifa Hospital, what we've seen from Al-Aqsa Hospital, and what I worry is coming to the remaining hospitals of the Gaza Strip, because it has been the pattern and we will not ignore it, is a direct and systematic targeting of healthcare that is unjustifiable.
He asks her this ridiculous question. So they don't say, can you tell us what happened in Al-Shifa Hospital? They say, is it true that there's Hamas in the hospital? Right? Like that, the Israelis, they were just killing Hamas people, right? But you see how they try to put the seed in your mind, they plant the seed in your mind that, oh, well, maybe the guest is going to lie because, there's Hamas in the hospital. The anchor said so.
So you know why the Armenian genocide is not recognized as a genocide?
Why?
Because Abe Foxman from the ADL, he's not the current guy, but Abe Foxman, a whole bunch of is like ADL, some other lobbies didn't want it recognized.
Really?
Because they thought it would take away from the original and still the best.
Holocaust.
I swear to God. That's 100%
no
true.
sequels.
Yeah, no sequels.
House bills will ask the U.S. Holocaust Museum to develop curriculum on the October 7th attack, creating resources for secondary schools and elementary schools to teach about October 7th and subsequent anti-Semitic and anti-Israel. First of all, why should little kids even be learning about October 7th at all? For what purpose? Whenever you're sub 8 years old. To the extent they should learn about October 7th, yeah, I think they should learn about atrocities, I guess, all over the world, and maybe about what happened subsequently and U.S. support and all of that. But we don't even spend enough time on our own history of Vietnam or World War I. I think we can spend a little bit less time on the histories of other places.
I mean, listen, you probably hear this and you're like, okay, what's wrong with learning about
No,
October
you shouldn't
7th?
have a problem with that.
Well, if it was going to be, all right, we're gonna take a look at this conflict, we're gonna dig into the origins, we're gonna tell you what happened so you can understand why this continues to persist and the nature of the occupation. No. That's not what you're gonna get from this Josh Gottheimer bill. The bill requests the new curriculum include information about the October 7th attack, how the history of anti-Semitism contributed to the attack, not about the land dispute and the occupation and the blockade, but the history of anti-Semitism, as President Biden said, the ancient hatreds and desires, right? That's the only thing that led to October 7th. Okay, even though there were many non-Jews who were killed on that day, by the way. It's also gonna talk about the quote-unquote spread of anti-Semitism and anti-Israel rhetoric on campuses, conflating, of course, anti-Semitism and anti-Israel rhetoric, and the spread of anti-Israel rhetoric on social media. So we've got to also learn how TikTok was, the real villain of October 7th was actually TikTok. So it's not like you're getting an actually factual understanding for our children of what led to October 7th, what happened on October 7th, what happened after October 7th.
So this article was in 2020, I believe, called TikTok Boom. Israeli army social media has big smiles and soldiers doing yoga from Haaretz. If you're a YouTuber, an online star, someone who lives and breathes social media with influence on those platforms, who's articulate and extremely creative, someone that's in front of a camera all day long and knows how to write the cleverest copy and create the most viral video clip, this is the place for you. That's not an appeal that's part of some ad agency campaign, but an announcement posted on the official website of none other than the Israel Defense Forces. This notice boasts a revolutionary step, the establishment of a committee of online influencers that will select a new team of army presenters. People accepted into the program will serve in the office of the IDF spokesman, realizing their potential and implementing their skills using the army's official platforms. And don't worry, if you want to earn recognition from the military, you can not go to war, but just post on social media. So just a funny headline before we watch some TikToks. Soldier awarded certificate for promoting unit IDF on TikTok. Sergeant Yao Derry, a military police officer, received a unique certificate of appreciation on Tuesday for promoting Israel and the IDF to over 1.7 million followers on TikTok.
הבאים לפודקאסט נפש לוחמת. היום אנחנו נמצאים בעזה.
המ"מ שלי, ינאי קמנקה, זיכרונו לברכה, מגיע, מחליף אותי. בעצם זה מה שמציל אותי מהעמדה.
So on this channel over recent months, I have been covering things about like IDF propaganda in general. We had 2 videos on the actual IDF TikTok account.
Hi everyone, Lieutenant Tammy here. I'll be going live on our pages again tonight. So leave any questions you have about the war between Israel and Hamas down below, and I'll be sure to answer all of them tonight.
And then we had another video about the IDF's YouTube account, which was funny, telling us all these inspirational stories about IDF soldiers who were ballet dancers and cooks in their spare time. So inspiring that fascist soldiers have hobbies.
And in these moments, I learned how to dance. When I dance, I feel free. I think I made the best decision for myself, to keep dancing. My name is Kayalon, I'm a dancer from Khadera, and I serve in the Israeli Defense Force.
But also, what I spoke about a lot in those videos was the use of women, and also the woke-washing of their fascist crime. In this bubble, they think a lot of this stuff is normal. Like, it's not disgusting to post yourself at like an occupied, conquered territory and talk about, you know, you want to wipe Gaza off the map. And that's just a normal thing to say. When we're talking about an influencer who was famous for being an IDF cat girl, for example, it seems like bizarre, it seems silly. But then you realize it's a symptom of like a wider problem in how dehumanized generally Zionist Israelis have like view Palestinians. IDF female influencer rabbit hole. So it's called Girls Defense, has 176k followers, the first IDF women's page, and it's been going on for a long, long time. Now, like if you just go on their profile, it's pretty sickening, but you have just like thirst traps, keep calling me a Zionist, nothing makes me prouder. This is like a disgusting picture, which you're going to see come up again. It's at a beach in Gaza, IDF beach episode, just her smiling with her gun, again, dystopian fascist shit right there, just talking about her experience, you know, in the IDF, and just like doing loads of poses with her guns, saying stuff like, last week I was at a Bruno Mars concert in Israel, now I'm at war listening to his songs, life is unexpected, and then contrast that with posts like, hi Barbie, and she's at the Barbie premiere, and she's dressed up like Barbie. Now she's a cyberpunk version of Siri, because she also does cosplay. So yeah, get your Siri cosplay in with your fascist propaganda. So here's a little video. Enjoy the views of Gaza, posted in December, of just, you know, people's homes, whole societies being utterly destroyed by the IDF, and she posts a smiling emoji. Like it's funny. Like what they're doing is funny right now. And you've probably seen those pictures of those Germans who work at the camps, and they're all smiling. They're having a good time. When you see that picture, it's a pretty famous one. You're like, how could these people do that? How could these people be so happy and do what they do? And you're seeing it right now. And that's what I want to get across this video. Now, through Girls Defense, remember this IDF influencer page, I found someone else who also has nearly 700,000 followers called Julie Orin. And she's like a gun influencer as well. Also is in the IDF as well. I think was in the reserves, but appears to have fought in the war to some capacity, or they're being used for propaganda. You can go through their posts and see all their posts about like training with guns, going to war in a tank. Before October 7th had a lot of stuff about, you know, first trapping, about being in the military and stuff. Again, if this society wasn't okay with what's happening, there would be a massive movement to dodge the draft. Like the Vietnam War was popular for the whole time in American society, and you still had a very, very visible anti-draft movement, which was popular. Because that is a country, for all its faults, even though the majority supported the war, that is a country that actually had a significant element who opposed the war and opposed fighting in this criminal war in Southeast Asia. There is no parallel in Israel. Because again, they're gripped by fascist hysteria and they're all going along with it.
It's been over 100 days since the war between Hamas and Israel started. Here are 5 facts you need to know. 1. The war started on October 7th when Hamas invaded Israel. Number 2. The IDF has 2 goals for this war. Number 1. Return all of the hostages safely to their homes. And number 2. Make sure that Hamas will no longer face a threat on Israel. Number 3. Hamas has been caught numerous times stealing the humanitarian aid that was facilitated by Israel and the IDF. Humanitarian aid that is meant to go to the people of Gaza. Number 4. Hamas has been repeatedly operating from civilian infrastructure, sensitive locations such as hospitals, schools, mosques, and kindergartens. And fact number 5, IDF soldiers are operating in complete accordance with our code of conduct and values of the IDF according to international law.
After 100 days in the war, one thing that gets me really motivated.
The thing that keeps me fighting this war even after 100 days.
I think my motivation is my family, my friends, those who can't fight. The cause of this war is very important. I think my country was hurt.
The people here, this country, it's our only home.
Knowing the cause of what we're doing, how many lives we're saving. All of us here together, stay strong against the enemy. We'll do what we need to do to keep our country safe. People should really know that we are defending our country.
We have nowhere else to go. This is our home and this is what we will fight for.
It's a really, really special ceremony. It was all about how our commanders felt for us on the 7th of October and how they really fought for us. And we wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for them. And I just feel so blessed and so thankful and so special and so grateful to be protecting Israel and to be able to be a part of this. And I'm just feeling a lot of love for the country, and I feel so grateful for the commanders that fought for us. And we're just going going to continue unfolding because we're going to fight for them like they fought for us, and we'll fight for everyone in Israel the same way they did for us on October 7th.
I'm a Black Hawk helicopter pilot. I'm an Air instructor.
I'm a combat patrol officer.
I'm an APC instructor. I'm a field observer. I teach combat soldiers how to drive, shoot, and operate the functions of this army vehicle.
I'm a search and rescue instructor.
I'm a cadet.
I join our soldiers on the field to document their operation. I'm a soldier in the military police corps.
I protect Israel's skies.
I'm a basic training commander.
I'm a Spike LR missile instructor. I'm in the IDF officers course.
I'm a combat soldier in training.
I observe and protect the Israeli borders.
I'm in the IAF technical right.
I train soldiers to locate and target specific threats.
I protect and observe the Israeli maritime borders. I make sure our aircraft are always ready for the next mission.
I'm training to be a combat soldier and protect my country.
I am protecting my country. And I'm protecting my country.